Hello, my name is Amala, and today I'm going to teach you how to play Happy Chaos. So we're going to go over some basic things at first. What moves are good, how to really play him, what he excels at, and we'll talk about how to negative edge and the things I do some of his more difficult stuff. If you're unfamiliar with negative edging, then just remember I'll go over that as well, so do not fret. So Happy Chaos is basically a mid-range zoner kind of mixed character. He's basically excelling at controlling the pace of the game and like how to really, pretty much after round start, you are going to control what happens on the screen. It's very hard for someone else to really force their own game plan once you have enough distance. This is in part to his zoning, which is through steadying. By doing this, you essentially end up making it so a lot of the time they have to play around you rather than vice versa, at least, you know, at longer ranges, just because of the strength of steadying. So we're going to talk about first what moves are good. So his 5P is a 5 frame, it's as fast as normal. It's not exactly perfect, but you know, it gets the job done for a 5 frame. What his really good buttons are though are 5K, it's 6 frames, really good range, really good return. 2K is also really good range, even longer range than 5K, but it's 7 frames versus, you know, 5K is 6. Fire Slash is also really good, but you can't really use it the same way. It is very bad on whiff, as you can see. In fact, it is punishable on hit unless you cancel into shots. So make sure to keep that in mind. 2S is pretty much his longest range poke. It is extremely good. It's one of the best like 2S's in the game. It's 11 frames, but ultimately like very strong. Far S is 10 frames, so sometimes if you want to be preemptive, you may have to use this, but again, be very careful with it. You cannot whip this button or you will die, and it'll be bad, you know. The thing to keep in mind with all these moves is basically 2S and Far S are really high return. 5K and 2K obviously, like, they can be if you cancel into 6K, which is also very good, mostly for pressure though, or his 6S, which is an incredible move. 6S is about 12 frames, I believe, and it is very strong. It can catch backdashes. It's 7 frames active, which is pretty rare in Guilty Gear Strive to have a move that active. There is some weakness in it though, because characters can low profile it even like really late into the move with a 2K or a 2D, even if you're like right close to them. Soul's not a great example. Basically, 2Ks will always beat this move, almost entirely. So, a good representation of this would actually be... Where is this? Right here. You can see that while 6K wins, because it's a very small gap, just because he goes so low, 6S will win. So this is important to keep in mind. Basically, low pokes like 2K or 2D are very good at counter poking against this move. So next up, we'll talk about his 2D. 2D is okay. It's also 10 frames, so it could be a bit better, but most of the time this move is used for its speed in situations where you don't want to whiff Far S, because whiffing Far S again is truly terrible. So let's talk about his mechanic, which is, it's on 5H, it is just gun. It is extremely powerful because it means that any string you do, you can make plus, you can hit confirm into if they get hit, and just all in all, at least like good combos, leads to knockdown. It is great. Of course, this is how there is one fatal weakness with it in that you cannot block while the gun's out. The only way you can block is if you cancel it with 2H. And obviously it is controlled by 2 meters above your meter at the bottom left of the screen, which is the bullets, which obviously, you know, refers to how many bullets he has in concentration. If you have no concentration, you will get this. animation, and if you have no bullets, if you do this in the game, it'll feel embarrassing. So don't do that. Pretty much, the two things that are around it are concentration and bullets. Bullets are not really a problem because of what we'll get into next, which is steady aim. So steady aim is pretty much, it's also gun, but it's like super gun. That's the best way to describe it. It's super gun. It tracks very fast. With Curse, it tracks instantly, which we'll get into Curse in a second, but with Curse, or even without it, his zoning is very, very strong. Of course, steady aim uses way more concentration, as you can see. The concentration bar is about 1,000, and each second in steady aim drains about 420 of the bar. That is not a joke. For some reason, it drains exactly 420. I'm not memeing, I swear. So managing these two resources with zoning, or how you do offense, is very important. Of course, the main thing to remember is that concentration will come back over time. Bullets do not. You have to always reload. So important to keep that in mind. Next is Curse. Curse makes it so your shots lock on nearly instantly in comparison to what it normally is. As you can see, it's quite slow if you pull up the gun normally with 5H. It's very slow, but with Curse, it's very fast, right? It's probably like maybe even over half the time. It's extremely fast. And in steady aim, it instantly locks onto them. Whereas without it, it takes about a second to lock on. So having Curse is very important. The only other thing to really note is his clone. His clone is pretty much a good stop sign for whenever you want to control space, because if they hit into it, it's similar to Oppose, where they are locked in hit stop, which essentially means that they cannot do anything unless they do a really like fast move, like a jab or something. Because if the higher attack level they press into it, like let's say 5H, the longer you have to punish them. So typically, it's really just good for getting your resources back. It does cost 10% health, so it is a little unstable in that way, because if they know how to deal with it, such as if they do a hit into RC, this is a very easy way to essentially die using clone. So let's talk about his more complex stuff now. So we're gonna get into negative edge. So if you're not familiar with negative edge is essentially you hold a button and the game will give you the input when you release the button rather than when you press it. So I'm going to give you an example. If I press 5P, you can see on the stick display, I'm holding it, but the button already came out, right? So it doesn't matter when I let go of it. It will always come out as soon as I tap it. Negative edge is not the same. Negative edge will release when I release the button. So here you can see I'm holding H. I've already pressed it. I release it, he shoots, right? Same thing with steady aim. I release it, he shoots. So this is pretty much, to do a lot of his better stuff, you have to negative edge, or some of his combos are honestly impossible to do. So if you're new to Happy Chaos and you're just trying to figure him out, don't rush into it. Try to take one thing at a time. But typically what makes this character especially strong is his hit confirms. Because of how his gunshot works, he can link a 5H shot to a steady aim shot, and that does a ton of damage. It's one of his most consistent combo tools, and pretty much it's everything you'd ask for, except it is extremely difficult. It's about a 1-frame link off a 2S or a 2-frame link off a 5S, assuming you are doing it perfectly. Or if, off of a 6K or 6S, it's basically the same. But to do this, I'll go over what I do, because again, this is one of the more important things about it. If you're very new, don't stress it. There's nothing wrong with just doing like this, you know, for knockdowns. But if you're ready to really practice some of the more harder stuff, it's basically this. So you can see there, how this works is you do a steady aim clean hit. So this is what happens if you don't clean hit. Notice how he doesn't jump up that high. Right? That time I actually did it by accident. But you can see it doesn't bounce in that high. It's kind of hard to combo off it. And it doesn't do as much damage. But if you get a clean hit, you can see it's very easy to run up and combo. And so I'm going to go over how I do this and how you can practice it yourself. So what I do is I do 2S, right? I hold 5H. While I'm doing this, I'll input 2 and 4S. I'll let go of H right before I press S and go into steady aim, right? Not like that. And then as soon as I do that, and I go into steady aim, I start holding H again, and I'll start inputting the input for 2-2-P. But instead of, you know, ending on P, I'll let go of H, and then I'll reload. So altogether, it looks like this. Right? So this is very hard, and this is going to be very hard on your wrists as well when you're first starting. Give it time, and please make sure to stretch and be careful. It is not easy on your wrist. I really can't overstate that. Be safe with your practicing, okay? So we'll talk about some extra things with him. So we haven't talked about roll, and that's because roll is typically not as good. You can use it to get out of the corner in some situations, but typically I would not advise using it. If you personally like using it, you know, go for it. But it can be beaten by FDing a lot of the time. So because of his shots being negative edge, it actually gives him a benefit of even how you zone. So how a lot of his stuff works is on hit, it will always guarantee you a charge or like an instant lock on, right? So how this works is if you put them in block stun, notice how it instantly puts them. The reticle will always lock onto him. It's impossible to miss. Unless you do this like late, right? So as long as they're blocking, you can do this. You can always just combo into a block string. And it's generally very good. But with his zoning, you can actually link it fast enough to loop the guard crush shot without any without curse. So curse is very important in general for, like, you know, how you can lock on instantly, but with this it makes it almost impossible to move. So what facilitates this is after every shot you do a reload. This actually allows you to cancel out of steady aim faster. It's actually quite a bit faster to cancel out of gunshot with steady aim, and it's very advantageous. People aren't 100% on the numbers, but it's anywhere between plus 13 to plus 19. So even if you do steady aim shot like this, as long as they get guard crushed, this is very plus. So funny enough, even though he's very good at running offense, he's also extremely good. He's not only just really good at running zoning, but also offense as well. He has some of the most powerful offense in the game, if not the best, because of this. This is also facilitated by his super, his concentration super. So each of his supers will refill his bar, one of his bars. So like, let's say his offensive super, Deus Ex Machina, it will refill his bullets, as you can see. Whereas this super will refill his concentration. So Deus Ex Machina is very good to end combos with, and this is usually really good to run offense with, because it essentially makes almost everything he does plus. So like, for example, close slash into this is about plus 6. I believe 6K or 6S into it is also +6. So it's very advantageous to just do a move into instant super, start running offense, and you go from there, right? So this is pretty much like the pinnacle of the character. It makes him very, very deadly when he has positive bonus, because he can essentially use his meter over and over again. The downside of concentration super is it kills his meter gain almost entirely. So like if I run forward, you can see that Happy Chaos gains meter as I run, right? Whereas if I do this and I run at him, he gains literally no meter. So it's pretty much until his meter, his super buff runs out. It's about maybe like a second or two before it actually runs out, I guess. Before it, like, that'll let his meter come back, basically. But ultimately, like, it's with positive that doesn't really happen, so he's typically the best character in positive bonus. And another benefit of him is obviously he gains a lot of meter, so by doing this string, you can do a lot of chip damage, bring a lot of their meter, and it just typically is very, very strong. We'll go over how to do this as well. So basically, because this is very plus, you cannot actually mash out of this. You need a VP or an invulnerable reversal to actually deal with this. I know it looks almost like unbelievable, but because of how advantageous Charge Gunshot is into reloading, you can see that there's not a lot of action to, take here. So it's limited purely by how long you can pretty much hold up the concentration or like the bullets. And to show you, it is a 3-frame gap, but it trades in his favor on them. And you can see if they mess up and they mash, it does a lot of damage. Of course, they can risk a backdash, but it is of course risky. So this is kind of a general blueprint of the character. So because of the fact that he tends to get damage almost everywhere, this is really where he shines. So as long as you're good at managing resources, you can always just gain like meter zoning, control how they move. If they get close enough, start running offense, right? Typically what I like to do is I'll zone them until they get close enough, and then I'll start my offense from there. One thing to note that is very important for this character, typically at the end of at the end of combos, you may notice sometimes people do this. They'll end in concentration and then they'll super. One thing to keep in mind about this is only possible through ending in a gunshot. For example, if you try to do this, you'll notice that it does not work. And that's because gunshot avoids any sort of hit stop, which essentially enables the fact that you can concentrate into super. So important to keep that in mind. General tips of this character, I would say his 6p is very good, but it's usually better when they're falling at a diagonal row. But he has probably the most highest damaging 6p in the game, so make sure to use it. It is a bit weaker against characters that can ID over you and like hit you still. A good example is like Mage up 2H, but typically he's got a pretty decent one. Just off the return alone. His air buttons are mostly okay, but usually they excel only to give him hit confirms through shots. They're not really the best. They're not really the best in any other way, unfortunately. But because of how good he is with positive bonus, you don't want to pass it up if you ever get the opportunity. Typically, I'll go over some more small details, such as throw at mid-screen usually will give you a bullet plus a meaty. Throw in the corner will typically give you 2 bullets, sorry, in a meaty. You cannot get focus off it because it is too long. It's about 46 frames, so it's a bit unreliable, unfortunately. But that's ultimately some of the most important things to keep in mind for him. Because he's so resource heavy, you have to be very good at managing your resources. One mistake can be very fatal, but he does enable a lot of creativity, as you can see here. Because of how he works, you can sometimes even cancel out a steady aim with Curse, with Roll, with Scapegoat, and you can end up using this to gain space, catch people off guard. But ultimately, you want to always cancel from steady aim into reload. And to give you more specific info on this, it's maybe only 4 or 5 frames slower than leaving it normally, which is through 214S, right? But funny enough, what makes this so much better than using something like Roll is that it gives him his bullets back, and it also saves concentration. Because obviously, if he does something like this, if he does a route like this, you can see he pretty much he ends it at like 25%, right? Whereas with this, he's only at 50%. Basically, being in steady aim does actually, or sorry, being in 5/8 shot, the 5/8 stance, I should say, is very, very, very draining. More so than you'd probably think. So keep that in mind. I'll give you a more accurate assessment. So you can see here, ends at about 75%, assuming you don't use it. So assuming you are wondering why you reload after every shot, outside of the bullets, there is a benefit in the fact that you can actually save concentration. I'll give you an example through 2 combos. So even if you end in putting away the gun at the very end, it's about maybe like 55%. Whereas with this, it's even more, and more damage as well. But I mean, that's a product of the combo I did. Ultimately, it's just better in every way for your resources. There are some routes where rolling is better. Like, for example, if they're off screen, sometimes you can roll and use the fact that you're closer to the corner as a benefit. But they're pretty rare and very specific and not really worth your time. So that's about it to keep in mind. The one downside he has is, of course, his defense. He doesn't have any invulnerable reversal. He doesn't have an invul super through Deus Ex Machina. This is not invulnerable. Neither is this. So a lot of the real struggle comes from learning the matchups, learning what matchups where you zone, where you play mid-range, and pretty much that's it. And learning how to defend against characters. Even though he is a very, he gains a lot of meter, he does a lot of damage. The fact that he has no defensive options in a game like Strive is quite problematic, to say the least. So make sure to always practice how to defend and execute well. And try not to make too many mistakes with how you do his things, because again, resources are very important. And if you have any questions or anything like that, please let me know in the comments, and I hope this was helpful for you. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Thank you. Bye-bye.